Hello Year 5 and welcome back to our second lesson in outdoor learning this half term. I am just going to share my screen and then we can get started. Fantastic, Year 5. We are looking at endangered species and conservation this half term. So the first thing I would like to do is just remind us those three key words that we're going to be looking at. So we've got species. So a species is a group of similar organisms. And these individuals within that similar group can reproduce to make more individuals from that same species. The word endangered. An endangered species is a species that is at risk of becoming extinct, and conservation is the protection of our natural environment, including the plants and animals within it. And there are different conservation categories. I wonder if you could either have a think, jot it down, or if there's someone next to you learning with you today, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to see if you can remember the three top categories that we discussed last lesson. Well done, Year 5. So we've got vulnerable, we've got endangered, and we've got critically endangered. Fantastic if you remembered that from last lesson. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit more detail about why these animals, not just these animals on your screen, but why there are lots of species that are endangered. So again, we looked at this last lesson. Very quickly, I'm just going to give you 15 seconds to, again, have a quick think, jot it down, or if there's someone learning next to you, why are some animals endangered? What is causing them to become endangered, and some of them to become extinct? Well done, Year 5. We looked at a few of these last lesson, but we're going to go into them in more detail today. So, there are 6 reasons why a species may be endangered. For some reason, only 3 of them have come up on my screen, but let's carry on and see what happens. So we've got hunting, which I think we discussed last time, overfishing in the sea, invasive species, we did not discuss that last time. There's loss of habitat, pollution, and also the pet trade. So those are the 6 that we are going to discuss today. There they all are. So as I said, those are the 6 we are going to discuss today. We're going to start with hunting. All right, so this is hunting animals in the wild, okay, hunting wildlife. And this is done for a number of reasons, okay. Sometimes it's for meat, so that people can have food. For trading, all right, trading is buying and selling. So for example, fur or ivory. So those, you can see in the corner there, there's a picture of some tusks, and that is sold. Then there is recreation. Recreation is like leisure time. Okay, so examples of this might be, for example, fox hunting. People do that for fun, for leisure. or trophy hunting, okay, where people hunt large and dangerous animals just so that they can take a photo next to them and say that they were able to hunt a really big and dangerous animal. Sometimes people hunt to remove predators that can be dangerous to humans or domestic animals. All right, so if you've got a predator that is eating all your cows and you are a cow farmer, you might decide that you need to hunt that predator in order to keep your animals safe. Also to remove pests that destroy crops or kill livestock. So the next one we're going to discuss is overfishing. So this is when we're removing a species of fish from the sea faster than that species can reproduce. And that means that the species of fish is getting smaller, the population is getting smaller. All right. And in the world at the moment, we are catching 5 times the amount of fish that we need. 5 times the amount of fish than we need. And this is happening for a number of reasons. So poor fish management, all right, so there's not much regulation of fishing in the seas. It's getting better, but obviously the sea is a very big place and it's very hard to regulate who's fishing where and when. Food, a huge amount of the population of the world eat fish. And this population, the human population, is growing, and therefore the demand for fish is growing. Trade, again, buying and selling fish. People want to make money out of it. Illegal fishing. Okay, so people fishing where or when they shouldn't really be doing that. And then there's 2 that are kind of a consequence of us going out and fishing, and that is catching the wrong species. So sometimes animals get caught up in nets and they are not released in time and then they end up dying. So catching the wrong species, and also catching small fish. All right, and that means that young fish don't get a chance to grow and reproduce before they are caught. So the next one we're going to look at is invasive species. Okay, so an invasive species is an animal or plant that harms an environment after being introduced to it by humans. And I think one of the best examples of that is here in the UK. I've seen quite a lot of grey squirrels, the little squirrel on the left-hand side. And that's because they are actually an invasive species. They're actually an American grey squirrel, which was introduced to the UK, I think around 1850. So it's been here a long time. But the red squirrel is native to the UK, so it's lived in the UK for about 10,000 years, they think. However, the grey squirrel, when it arrived in the UK, it had some disease that the red squirrel wasn't used to. So a lot of the red squirrels got sick and died. The grey squirrel are also better at getting nuts and berries, and they're also quicker at reproducing, at breeding, so they can make more of themselves quicker. So what's happened? The grey squirrel is everywhere, as you know. You will see it in your parks and on your trees, I'm sure, in your local area. Whilst the red squirrel is declining, population decline, and actually in England and Wales there aren't very many red squirrels at all. Luckily in Scotland they are trying to conserve the red squirrel, so there's still quite a few red squirrels in Scotland, but not very many in England at all. So that's what we mean by an invasive species. Pollution. So human waste. all types of waste affects the environment animals live in. And just as an example, in the sea alone, plastic pollution has affected at least 267 species in the sea, including 86% of turtles, 44% of seabirds, and 43% of marine mammals. And marine mammals die every single day just from ingesting, that means eating, plastics of all sizes. And there's different types of pollution. So, for example, streams and rivers that are full of chemicals from our factories. Rubbish, like plastic, in our oceans and on our land. Farm nutrients, so when people are farming, they put fertilizer and other nutrients into their soil to make their plants grow. And when it rains, these are washed out into rivers and streams and into the sea. And air pollution. And that you can probably think of some other types of pollution as well. So this is an interesting one. It's the pet trade. Okay, and this is when wild animals are taken from their natural habitat and sold as pets. And there is a demand for wild animals, and people can make money by selling animals for pets. And this used to happen a lot, and happens less now, but it still happens. And I think this is one of the key risks or threats to animals today, and it's a loss of habitat due to what humans are doing. So this is for a number of reasons. We are expanding our agricultural land, so that's when we grow crops for food or to graze our animals such as cows and sheep. We're expanding urban areas. So, for example, if you looked at a map of London 200 years ago, it would be much smaller than it is now, and we've expanded as the population has grown. Cutting trees for wood or for fuel. And deforestation, when we cut those trees, can cause erosion. So that means the soil isn't secured by those trees' roots anymore, and can end up in streams and rivers and seas, which then affects the habitats of those animals in the water. And climate change, the melting of the ice caps, rising sea levels. Various places have got hotter and hotter over the years, and if they're already extremely hot places, animals aren't going to be able to survive. Droughts when there's no water whatsoever, and floods when there's too much water, when it rains and things flood. And that's just some examples. You might be able to think of some other reasons why there is loss of habitat. Okay, so your activity today, what I would like you to do is I would like you to write a paragraph about the threat to animals you feel the most passionately about. So if you think that we should really stop hunting because you think it's awful, then I'd like you to write a paragraph about hunting. If you think the most important thing that us as humans need to do is cut down on our pollution, then I'd like you to write a paragraph about pollution. And if you think it's loss of habitat, pet trade, invasive species, or overfishing, then you can write about any of those 6 that we've discussed today. I would like you to include what the reason is. I'd like you to give a definition. What is hunting? What do we mean by pollution? Why is it happening? And there may be more than one reason. Okay, so we discussed quite a lot of reasons for hunting. There was lots of reasons that there's a loss of habitat. Which animals are affected? Okay, so which animals are affected by hunting? Which animals are affected by loss of habitat? And the final thing I'd like you to include in your paragraph is what can be done to help conserve these animals that are threatened. And you can include a picture if you would like. So to help you, you can use this video, as I've done quite a lot of talking about these 6 threats. Obviously, you can do your own independent research. And on your worksheet, I've got some little endangered species cards, which explains which species are affected by which threat. Just as an example, I decided to look at invasive species, and as you can see, I'm going to just quickly read it to you. At the beginning, I explained what an invasive species was. So I've said an invasive species is an animal or plant that is introduced to a new environment and negatively affects that new environment. Okay, then I've said why this happens. Some animals and plants are moved into new habitats deliberately so that humans can hunt them as a form of pest control or as an exciting new animal or plant species. So that's, I've explained why. Oh, I've got a second sentence explaining why. Sometimes animals and plants are accidentally released into the wild whilst humans are travelling or transporting goods. And then I do a sentence explaining what happens. So some plants and animals carry disease or are more successful than the native animals and plants, which may lead to a decline in population. So that's what happens. And then I'm going to give some examples of some animals that are affected by this threat, the invasive species threat. So in the UK, there are over 3,000 invasive species. Some are more well-known invasive animal species, like the grey squirrel and the Asian hornet. And I've already discussed the grey squirrel, but I go on to discuss it here. So I've said the grey squirrel has caused a decline of the red squirrel, which had been in the UK for 10,000 years. The grey squirrel carried a disease called squirrel pox, which kills a lot of red squirrels. It is also thought that they can breed quicker and are better at collecting nuts and berries. Red squirrels are now rare in most of England and Wales, but can still be found in Scotland. So I would also, which I completely forgot to do, I would add one more sentence about what they are doing in Scotland in order to protect the red squirrels, because there's lots of conservation projects going on in Scotland. So I would have written a final sentence about the conservation because I left that off. Okay. Fantastic, Year 5. Sorry, lots of information today, so please feel free to re-watch the video, particularly about the threat that you are going to be writing about today. And like always, I am looking forward to seeing your work uploaded on Seesaw. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.